Is your axolotl not eating? Let's talk about why that might be and how you can get them back on track. The most common reason axolotls go on food strikes is bad water quality, so make sure you're testing those parameters. Next would be temperature. If the water's warmer than 68 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to be stressing that axolotl out too much to want to eat. The same thing can happen if you let it get too cold, so around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, their metabolisms will slow down and they won't be able to digest food properly, so they just don't really take it. Don't forget, 60 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is the axolotl sweet spot. Another reason they might go off of food is if they're dealing with an injury or illness. This can include anything from bacterial or fungal infections, impactions, internal parasites, or wounds. If they're trying to heal an issue or a wound, they'll be using a lot of their energy to do that, so it's pretty common for them to lose their appetite in the process. Just like me, even small stressors can affect their appetite, so things like getting a new tank, getting a new tank mate, having their tank rearranged, having too strong of a filter, having the lights too bright for their tank, or handling and bugging them too much. Or even if they've just been shipped. Sometimes they'll even go on food strike just because they got freaked out by their food. So if you feed them something a little too big or a worm that's a little stronger than they expected, they might stay away from it for a few days after that. Sometimes it can be from offering too much food, so some axolotls will realize when they're full and they won't accept any more after that. It's pretty common for new axolotl owners to go through a little freak out phase if they've raised a juvenile that they got used to feeding multiple times a day and have them all of a sudden go to only wanting a worm every other day when they've hit adulthood. This is normal. Unfortunately, there are some axolotls who will not stop eating when they're full and regurgitate their food. If you don't realize that this happened, they will spoil in the water, and this can also shut them off of worms. Which is my next point, spoiled food. Nobody wants to eat that. Whether they're a male or a female, if they're in a breeding period, that can also distract them. If they're not getting the food they want, that can also cause them to go on a food strike, but unfortunately, axolotls are pretty famous for getting hooked on the food that they're used to, whether it gives them the nutrients they need or not. So I've noticed it's pretty common for axolotls to get hooked on dry foods like pellets, and then later decide they're tired of them without accepting anything else. So those have been my hardest rehabilitation cases, getting those axolotls onto proper diets, but it is possible, and I'll make videos about that specifically soon. Those are the most common reasons I can think of off the top of my head, so here's some tips to get them back on food. First, make sure it's not an issue with the environment. Check your ammonia, nitrate, pH, temperature. Check that the lighting isn't too bright, that there isn't any hidden worms that are dead in your tank. If your parameters are off at all, you're going to want to recycle your tank, and if you need help with that, I've got videos on it. Ask yourself, is it dealing with any injury or illness? Have I changed anything in the tank? Does he have a new buddy? Is the current in the tank too strong? Some are just naturally picky and will prefer a specific type of worm, so you might have to do some experimenting and offering them different kinds. Some axolotls will care about how you offer them the food, so some will want it dropped on their head, some will want it offered to them by hand, some will want it offered from under their chin, and some will just want it dropped in front of them so that they can sniff it out later. Sometimes you can entice their snap response by wiggling the prey in front of them to try to get their hunting instincts going. Try offering the food at different times of the day. Most will prefer it at night because that's when they're most active, but you can try other times too. Some axolotls will need the larger worms to be snipped in half or smaller pieces. You can also try just fasting them for a couple of days where you don't feed them to see if building up their hunger will help. If none of those work, you can move on to trying appetite stimulants. Axolotls really like the taste of raw salmon or raw shrimp. You don't want to rely on these because they will get really fat, but you can also use Seachem's Garlic Guard. It's basically just garlic juice, and it's interesting. Garlic works as an appetite stimulant for humans. It also works on axolotls. So just put a couple of drops of this in a shot glass or a ramekin and put your worm in it and just let it sit in there for a minute before you feed it. Now, an adult axolotl can safely go for 1 to 2 weeks without eating without causing any permanent damage. However, if you've gotten to 3 weeks and this video hasn't helped you, I would recommend taking it to a vet at that point because you're most likely dealing with an illness, parasite, or impaction, unfortunately.